The following is a special video presentation of the Hennepin County Library.
Hi, welcome to a discussion with John Kabat-Zinn. I'm Eileen Cavanaugh from the Hennepin County Library Program Office, and my guest today is the author of Wherever You Go, There You Are, Mindfulness, Meditation in Everyday Life. John Kabat-Zinn is the founder and director of the Stress Reduction Clinic at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center. Welcome, John.
Thank you,
Glad to
Eileen.
have you with us today.
It's nice to be here.
Your book was great. It has short chapters, it's readable, it's the sort of thing that I wanted to pick up and read at least specific chapters over and over again. And in addition, I want to tell our audience too that I found it a very meditative experience just to read the book, even if I didn't. It had that sort of calming effect on me.
Well, I'm thrilled to hear that, because as the author and somebody who cares deeply about meditation, the book is about meditation, and all of my work is about using meditation in the mainstream of medicine and society. It would be really a crime not to write a book that wasn't itself meditative in some way, and so that's what I set out to do, is write a book that anybody might pick up and read, and just by virtue of reading it, begin reflecting in perhaps a slightly different way about their life and their experiences, particularly their relationship to the present moment, than they might do if they hadn't picked up a book like that.
Well, I think that's an important point. This is a book for everybody. It's not at all esoteric. It's very readable. And I want to say that this present moment was an experiment for me, because one day after reading the section on being mindful of one's routine things, I just paid attention to working at the computer and sort of slowed down my rush thing with it. And I was amazed to find out that I really accomplished more work by slowing down than I did in my usual rush fashion.
You see, the essence of meditation is that inner discovery for oneself. So it's never the teacher or the author that's doing it for you. It's always the person who comes to it themselves and discovers that there's a richness in the texture of one's own life and one's own moments and one's own relationship to work, in this particular case, or whatever, that often we ignore because we're too driven or too busy. And then when you slow down and in some way do less, you find out that that less is more. And I love that. And it's a very deep experience and a very genuine experience. And if you have it in one domain of your life, you can see immediately and intuitively that it could apply in many, many other domains of your life as well. But it's sometimes scary, the idea that you'll slow down, because we're so pressed for time and we have so many obligations and responsibilities. There's a tremendous power in it, and of course that's what the book is all about. It's a challenge to the reader to discover that power for him or herself, and that it lies within him or herself.
Speaking of power, one of the really powerful things seemed to me your story about a man who returned from a retreat and told you that the most important thing he had learned was that to do no harm, and he wanted to base his life on doing no harm. At first glance, it seemed to be a negative thing, and the more I thought about it, the more powerful it seemed that if one could really go through one's life and at the end of life say, well, I didn't do any harm to anybody, it would be quite remarkable.
Yeah, it moved me greatly. I'd never really heard anybody say that before, and he said it with a level of conviction and caring that really stunned me. And this was somebody that I knew casually at the time. You know, that is the core of the Hippocratic Oath that all doctors take, is to at least do no harm. And I think that we would do well to remember it more and to try to practice that. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to start with ourselves, because there are an awful lot of self-destructive impulses and thoughts and feelings that come up in the course of a day that actually negate our self-worth in one way or another, that don't honor or respect or acknowledge the beauty and the genius and the miracle of being human and having a human body and being able to sit here and talk with each other and to understand. I mean, we're making airwaves move that hit each other's ears, and yet something far deeper is going on, and it's quite miraculous.
It's sort of a lifetime work when you talk about living the present moment always, or increasing that ability.
That's exactly what it is, and I often frame it that way. I say this is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and it really is a lifetime's work. But it's very important that people not think that I'm talking about a lifetime of tedium and self-consciousness. Oh my God, now I gotta be in the present moment all the time and be aware of my hand. Is my hand on my knee, or should it be on my knee? Am I scratching? Am I doodling? And just get incredibly uptight, wondering where you are all the time. We're talking about something that's much more humorful, relaxed. It's not at all self-conscious. It's conscious, not self-conscious.
Uh-huh.
And the mind has a life of its own, as you discover as soon as you sit down and start paying attention to the present moment. You'll discover the mind doesn't want to be in the present moment. It's got its own agenda. It goes into the future, it goes into the past, worries tremendously, it's obsessed, it's angry. You know, one moment it'll be this, the next moment it'll be that. It's amazing we can accomplish anything at all during the day, given how distracted and obsessed we sometimes are. Now, none of that's bad, but it keeps us from living fully or appreciating fully the only moments that our lives ever unfold in, and those are the present moments. So we're only alive now. The future hasn't happened yet, and the past is already over, and we can't affect it. So if you really want to affect the future, you have to affect the present. Thoreau said, to affect the quality of the present, that is the highest of arts.
I noticed
and
that
it takes work. It's not something where you just say, oh yeah, I read Thoreau, so from now on my present moments are going to be wonderful. Since we're practicing so much of the time being kind of on automatic pilot and mindless, we've gotten awfully good at it because practice makes perfect. So we have to turn that one on its head, and in the spirit of fun and adventure and vitality, experiencing the vitality of our own lives, practice being present where we already are, as we already are, without judging ourselves. Turns out that's non-trivial, kind of hard work, but as far as I'm concerned, it's the heart of what it means to be really human.
Very ambitious.
Yes and no. I started this stress reduction clinic at the University of Massachusetts 15 years ago to see whether people who are falling through the cracks of the healthcare system and in some way or another not getting cured, not getting satisfaction from their healthcare treatments, couldn't be enticed or challenged to do something for themselves as a complement to what the healthcare system was doing for them. And this is, of course, this new model of participatory medicine where the patient has to be as much a participant in the process as the healthcare team. And we train people in this mindfulness meditation as the heart of what they do in our stress reduction clinic. And although it is deeply ambitious, it also turns out that people take to it like ducks to water across the board, not as a airy-fairy, mystical, Eastern type thing, and these are not people who are coming looking for that kind of experience or for a New Age experience or for enlightenment. They're coming because their lives aren't working and because their bodies very often aren't working and they're hurting and they're in pain or their relationships are in pain. And I think what it's excuse me, I think what it's taught me over the years is that we're all geniuses. People are just geniuses, and the body really is miraculous. And although, as you say, it's ambitious to think that someone might devote their life to trying to be more mindful, there's a way in which that doesn't take any extra time. It's a matter of a rotation, a slight rotation in consciousness in the way you'll interface with things and look at things. And ordinary people, quote unquote, take to this in extraordinary ways and wind up saying years later or weeks later that it was a turning point in their lives to come to know the mind and the body in ways that they had never paid any attention to, and that it led to openings and transformations in their lives which they consider to be profoundly healing. That does not mean that they are meditating away their cancers or even lowering their blood pressure or changing their T-cell counts or whatever. Those things do happen sometimes, but they're not doing it for that. They're doing it to really be more wakeful and appreciative of the moments that they have, and therefore deal much more effectively with the pressures and the stress that they're under.
So you spent a lot of time in the book saying what meditation is not. Meditation is not to accomplish some of those things, or not even to quiet the mind.
Right.
What is it for?
Okay, well, first of all, I'll say why I say that it's non-doing and it's not trying to get anywhere, so it's non-striving and so forth. And the reason I do that is because people have the idea that meditation is to relax or to achieve a particular quote-unquote meditative state, and that when you reach that state, you'll feel a certain way, and then everything will magically come together. And
or if you don't reach that
and by
state,
extrapolation,
you failed.
right? And if you don't reach that state, you failed. And by extrapolation, if you do reach that state, then the underlying thought is then all your problems will fall away. And I really want to disabuse people of that notion. Meditation means paying attention in a particular way. So sometimes you're not relaxed, you're tense. And meditation is not to try to get relaxed, it's to allow yourself to be so relaxed that it's okay to be tense. Okay, which is paradoxical. In other words, you bring awareness to the tension and just watch and let it be without reacting or judging. It turns out that very often that leads to the dissolution of the tension over time, just as if you take a soap bubble and you touch it gently with your finger, the soap bubble pumps. So very often attention will do that. You have a particular sort of eddy going on in the mind. You bring attention to it, that eddy sort of dissolves a little bit. But it doesn't always. Sometimes it gets worse. Let's say you have some pain or a headache and you bring awareness to it, expecting the headache will go away. Well, the headache may get worse. What we're working with more is the expectation rather than just the headache. We're just experiencing the qualities of the headache without trying to change it in any way, and let go of the expectation. Meditation should get rid of it. Otherwise, when it doesn't, you'll say, oh, the meditation failed, or I failed, I'm no good. So you ask, well, okay, we've said what it isn't, what is it? My view of meditation is that what it is it's a particular way of paying attention, and that is on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmental. Now, that's saying a mouthful when you stop and think about it, because we are all capable of paying attention, but most of the time we don't. We're a kind of on automatic pilot, as I said, kind of more mindless than mindful, a little bit out to lunch, so absorbed here that we don't see what's happening in front of our faces. And we have the capacity to change that simply by bringing awareness to it. So now the present moment we spoke about already, the value and the virtues of that, and the non-judgmental thing, that's noticing that we have an ongoing storyline about what I want, what I don't want, where I'm going, what should happen, expectations, condemnation, being drawn towards the things you want to be drawn towards, pushing away the things you don't want. It takes an awful lot of energy to keep that going. And what meditation really is a slowing down, a stopping, and just watching whatever it is that comes up. So I like to put it this way. It's kind of like identifying with the ocean as a whole. Now, the surface of the ocean is like waves. Depending on the weather, the waves could be either bigger or smaller. The mind is the same way. Depending on the emotional weather, the waves can either be big or the waves can be small.
Or there could be a hurricane.
Or it could be a hurricane, or sometimes it could be very, very flat and calm. And there are times when the sea is almost like glass or like a mirror. They're quite rare. In the same way, there are times that the mind can be completely still, but we're not trying to make the mind still. That would be like taking a piece of plexiglass, putting it over the ocean and saying, ocean, from now on, no waves. Just it's in the nature of the mind to wave. But it's also part of the meditation practice to identify with the entirety of the ocean, in other words, the depth as well. And even during a hurricane, down below 20 or 30 feet, it's just gentle undulation. So if you can bring awareness to the entirety of your experience of the present moment and just allow it to be as it is, then the mind will be waving, there will be sensations of various kinds in the body, and the whole thing would just be held in awareness in a timeless present moment, because the present is timeless, you're not going anywhere. And that is a deep form of nourishment. It's like gardening, it's like fertilizing a garden and then watching things sprout. And what sprouts very often are profound new ways of seeing, including insights into levels of connection or relationship that may have been there all along but that you just don't see because the mind veils it so much of the time with our own thinking. Now that's very akin to the creativity process in science, for instance, that you can't will yourself to think the next great paradigm thought or whatever. You have to let go. And of course we're all good at that, because if we didn't know how to let go, we'd never be able to go to sleep.
In fact, there are stories of scientists who have dreamed the answer.
Exactly.
To
And there are many stories like that, Nobel laureate understandings, breakthroughs, where you filled your mind with everything that's known, but you have to make the leap into the unknown. And you can't do that with thinking. You have to do that with something that's very often called intuition, but it has to do with an openness and a holding and a patience that just lets it percolate, and then all of a sudden you see connections you didn't see before.
So you're saying that meditation is life doesn't change, but meditation sort of adds a new dimension or depth to it.
Yes. Well, life does change. In fact, I would say that that's the most characteristic aspect of life, is that it's constantly changing, that life is constantly changing, it's constantly adapting to its surroundings. And if you're not adapting, then, as Dylan said, you're busy being, dying rather than busy being born. And so stress has everything to do with adaptation. Either you're adapting well or you're adapting poorly, but we're always adapting. So people who drink a lot or smoke a lot or do drugs or whatever, very often the impulse for doing all of those things is to achieve some peace of mind. Mm-hmm. They're desperate attempts to cope and to deal with the forces and the pressures, but they themselves are highly stressful and just compound the problem. So this is a way of finding inner peace, if you will, or calmness or equanimity within the storm of the mind and of the body and of a life that's constantly having to face new challenges and new stresses and is growing and growing older and changing and so forth. But it turns what very often feels like a life out of control into something of an adventure that you may not have total control of, but at least you can stick your oar in the water every once in a while, and with a certain level of mindfulness and perceptive understanding about the oar and the boat and your body and the river, you can guide your course a little bit more than if you're not paying any attention at all.
Do you think some people have a harder time with meditation? For instance, the kind of person who is used to using a chemical to achieve quick results?
Well, I think that it depends on how pushed to the edge people are. We see people who are very often really pushed to the edge, and they're the ones who are the most highly motivated to really open up and do this kind of thing. And people who feel there's nothing wrong in my life and everything's great and whatever it is, they're going to be fairly bored by meditation at first, because or not drawn to it, because they'll say, well, what's going on here? This isn't adding anything for me. And the answer is, yeah, that's absolutely right. The point is not to add anything nor to subtract anything, but to just be present with things as they are. I don't think meditation is for everybody at every point in their lives. I think that people are drawn to it mostly either through a deep yearning for understanding themselves better, and a lot of people may not feel that they want to at some points in their life, or because they're in a great deal of pain, or there's a sense of a certain dissatisfaction that although I may have everything going right in my life, there's something missing. Well, that something is usually a connection on a soul level to yourself. And that can be nourished, cultivated by starting to pay attention to the things that we most take for granted, like, say, your body and your breathing. And this may sound weird to people who haven't experienced it, because it's not a philosophy, it's not something you talk about. You start hanging out with your breath, your entire relationship to your body changes.
Speaking of cultivation, you have a wonderful chapter on patience and the relationship that it seemed to me to meditation was that it's a way to cultivate, a way to sort of build on the idea of a meditative life.
Yes.
And there's nothing like needing to develop patience.
Yeah. Well, there are certain qualities that really enhance mindfulness and reinforce it, and patience is certainly one of them. Usually we're driven by anxiety, and we're impatient because we want something to happen, and we're frustrated when it doesn't happen, and that usually leads to anger, and it's a whole sort of stream of things, and that anger leads to not seeing clearly, and then you're liable to do things that are harmful either to yourself or others, even on a small scale. And so to be aware of the potential to be more patient and more accepting and more understanding that very often you cannot push the river. Things have to unfold in their own time. People have to come to a certain level of decision for themselves. And if you try to push things, then that sets other balls rolling that very often will wind up in the future undermining what your motive was for doing things in the first place. So to know how to put energy in a good way, and at the same time when to stop and just let things proceed on their own, is a level of wisdom that can be deepened by paying attention to the possibility of patience and reminding yourself that it's possible to align yourself with that understanding.
During the Winter '94 Olympics, which were just completed now a while back, some of the people said that their experience was that during their practice for the Olympics, they were paying a lot of attention to the technicalities and the rules of the game, but when they actually did their performance, all that fell away, and if it was indeed a flawless or relatively flawless performance, it was a kind of meditation in itself.
Well, in one of the chapters, I have 4 chapters in that book called Non-Doing of one kind or another. In one of the chapters I mentioned that experience of things falling away during a perfect performance in sports or whatever. And I've worked with Olympic athletes and with world-class athletes of one kind or another, and college athletes. And in most cases, they're all superbly trained physically, but they don't pay all that much attention to mental preparation or mental training, and anxiety or lack of concentration can throw you off terribly, or a feeling of inadequacy compared to the other people that you're competing against. And if the mind is stirred up by those kinds of thoughts and feelings and doesn't know how to handle them, because it's perfectly normal to have those kinds of thoughts and feelings, then they can trap you and make it less likely that you'll perform effectively. In a perfect performance, no one claims that they're doing anything. It's almost as if you let go in the wisdom of your training, and the mind and the body and what you're out there to do all come together. And that the perfection really comes when the artist gets out of his or her own way and just lets the whole thing happen. For downhill skiing, it's almost as if the mountain is taking care of it for you. You just let yourself fall down the mountain in a controlled fall. And of course, it's easy to say, but you have to train for years and years to do it. But you also have to get out of your own way and ski the edge.
So it's a wonderful concept, this letting go, for lots of places in our lives.
Exactly. So that means that meditation can happen anywhere, on the ski slopes, in the swimming pool, driving to work, and doesn't have to be with your eyes closed, of course. Also, getting the kids dressed in the morning to get them out to school. Perfect opportunity for mindfulness.
Or cleaning the stove.
Cleaning the stove.
Later on, you talked about generosity, and I love this little piece. I think it was in the Things to Try section, which I want to talk about too. You suggest generosity toward in a situation in which you would not ordinarily feel like being generous, which adds another dimension. You talk about kingly giving.
Yeah. Sometimes, we just, there are times when we feel so magnanimous, we just want to we would give away anything to somebody. But there are other times when there's a sense like maybe somebody wants something from me and I don't want to give it just because they want it. And so instead of projecting onto that person that they're bad or they're greedy or whatever, sometimes it's really valuable to just give it because you don't want to. And even if it's a loss, it's always more of a gain than it is a loss. And so that's part of the practice, is to see your own boundaries and your own limits. And if they have to do with greed or holding back or protecting or some way a contraction of your own being, to on purpose open that one up and give a little bit more than you would ordinarily give. And then just as an experiment, see how you feel about it afterwards. And, the thought is, well, I'll feel taken advantage of or ripped off. But the fact of the matter is it almost never works out that way. You feel wonderful because you've actually let go of something that has a constricted energy to it, that has an attached energy to it, that holds you down. Then if it can be of benefit to the other person, so much the better. But that's only part of the reason why you'd be doing the giving.
I want to talk a little bit about the things to try section in your book, which I found very helpful. You talked about having goals in life, and when I read that, I thought, I'm not sure I could articulate goals in life, and yet I think I probably have them. But when I read the section of things to try, it seemed to me those could well be goals for people. And the things that I did try in connection with reading the book produced some very unusual results sometimes.
Like what?
Well, speaking of the generosity that I tried out when I really, in a situation, I really did not want to expend my energy, and did. And it was just, I just made my whole day feel very different. As you said, it had nothing to do with the way the person, the recipient of the generosity felt, but it had a lot to do with the way I felt.
So it's a way of taking care of yourself.
Yes,
in a sense.
One wouldn't think so,
No.
at least initially.
Well, I think
it seemed like I have to do this.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do it. And it was surprising how different it felt after I had actually given that gift.
Well, I put these try sections at the end of the chapters in the book, and they're not on all the chapters. They're just certain chapters where I've thrown out certain suggestions, and they're not really goals. They're meant to be kind of just arrows pointing in a particular direction, like you might want to try this, you might want to try that. And they're scattered throughout the book just to bring the reader more into a participatory sense, that this is not reading somebody's ideas on the way things should be, but it's really a mirror that you're looking in, and yourself is looking back at you, and you're getting to sort of reflect, if you will, on deeper aspects of how you carry your being.
Well, John, I had many more questions, but our time is gone.
Oh.
Our mindful time is gone. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure talking with you.
And thank you to the audience for joining us on A Discussion With.
A presentation of the Hennepin County Library.